The difference is the conceptual scope, I think, the time horizon. Politics is a response to the urgencies of the day. It is animated by grievances, by contestations, by the need to solve conflicts. This binds politics to the short view. Economics, being a science, should supply the long or the longer view. And this makes policy, and should make policy more perceptive, wiser. However, exactly in this sense, the predominant form of economics, new classical economics, has disappointed. With this theory of rational expectations, it's concerned with utility maximization, is penchant for mathematical modeling, system building, and deductive reasoning. It has proven to be quite useless for politics. But why is this? This has to do with the peculiarity of political judgment. And I have written a book about that actually on political judgment. That peculiarity was first observed by Aristotle. He noted that in political matters, the proper object of judgment are the particulars of our collective existence. Therefore, practical wisdom, what he called phronesis, practical wisdom, not general principles and theoretical reasoning, is what is needed when we seek the right organization of society, which is the main concern of politics. But the dominant form of economics is void of phronesis, of practical wisdom. The source of that short-sightedness are two. First, the obsession of neoclassical economics with abstract laws. Second, economics is seduced by what can be measured. It overlooks, therefore, the rest. Because of that, the danger is that economics often gives the wrong diagnosis of the phenomenon that interests politics. And politicians then respond with the wrong policies. Let's take an example. The way economists have tried to explain the rise of far-right populism in recent times. The typical explanation goes something like this. So in recent decades, inequality has increased, so the story goes. Globalization has split society between winners and losers. You know the story. Thomas Piketty has warned, for instance, that unless we do something about inequality, which is the main concern in his writings, populism would become more militant. So inequality is the culprit in this story of the rise of populism. Institutes, conferences, even academic degrees in inequality studies have mushroomed. Why is this? Because inequality is a statistical fact. It can be measured and reported. It makes headlines. The wealth increase of 10 men during the pandemic could buy vaccines for all, Oxfam reported a couple of days ago. Or headlines like the world's richest 1% own 44% of the world's wealth. This is striking. This captures attention. So economists see a correlation between the upsurge of populism and the rise of inequality and conclude that the former is caused by the latter, that inequality causes populism. Now, other scientists would approach the matter differently. A historian would note that capitalism has always created inequality. There's nothing remarkable or novel about that. This would prompt us, to just noticing this would prompt us to ask, how come inequality suddenly matters? The same historian might also note that while far-right insurgencies have usually been sparked by economic crisis, as in the case of the rise of Nazism in the 30s, the current wave of populism began rising in the affluent 1990s in conditions overall in the West of good economic growth and low unemployment. Curious, isn't it? This points the analysis in another direction. The inequality comparisons we read about are taken between people from vastly different social groups. A social psychologist would look at that and would remark that we usually compare ourselves to other people from the same socioeconomic group. So growing inequality is not as visible to the average person as to spark political action. A sociologist would draw on surveys disclosing that most people do not care about inequality and that most poor people in capitalist democracies actually admire the rich. What do we make of that? So a political theorist would remark that it is strange, maybe even symptomatic, that the radicalization is taking a shift to the right and not to the left, as many expected, as impoverishment should, shift people to the left. Now, I'm not an economist, I'm a social theorist. So a social theorist like me, one who is tempted to draw on history, psychology, sociology, would therefore take the very concern with inequality, not on its face value, but as a sign that a new social phenomenon has emerged, a novel social evil, which we are wrongly expressing with the available language of injustice, that of equality. And this is because the phenomenon is so new that we do not have a term yet for it. I have argued in my last book, Capitalism on Edge, it came out in January with Columbia University Press, that what is ailing the 99% is not inequality, but massive precarity. The social and economic insecurity that now affects everyone, rich and poor, men and women, manual labor, and the highly skilled. But this has escaped the attention of economists because precarity cannot be measured. You cannot pin it down with mathematical methods. Then, to be politically useful, we need to dig deeper and ponder when inequality becomes a social problem. The answer is when it translates into social inequality. That is when wealth translates into social privilege. We then should ask further, what are the drivers of this? And I think there are two. First, when specific institutional mechanisms translate personal wealth into power, for instance, campaign financing in the US. Second, when the public commons, the commons are so depleted that we need to rely on personal wealth to secure for ourselves such essentials as healthcare and education. For this kind of analysis, for this kind of diagnosis of the roots of the problem underlying the rise of populism, economics needs to be informed of history, psychology, and sociology at least. And the policy prescription would not be a simple redistribution from rich to poor, as progressive economists now so eagerly prescribe. The solution would be to eliminate the institutions that translate wealth into power and privilege, and build, and we should build the commons, build up a solid public sector. So back to the link between economics and politics, what we probably need to do is to redefine economics again as political economy, to regain some of its connection to the realities of politics.